All right. Now we're gonna talk more about artificial intelligence, and I'll start with the questions that you raised in the last class, and we will take from there. Okay, so I don't know whether you can see, the question is, Professor, I've heard about the term self-censorship before, and I wonder what it means and if it is somehow related to prior censorship we learned today. Are prior censorship and self-censorship the opposite notions of each other? Or two completely different things. They are not even opposite of each other. Self-censorship is when you refuse to, well, not refuse, you withdraw from speaking when you withdraw from, when you abstain from making completely lawful statements, right, in fear of being persecuted or inconvenienced by the government or other people who may don't like the statements. Okay, that's self-censorship. So there is a legal. So for instance, let's take a nude picture, right? Nude picture itself is not illegal because you find that in medical textbooks, sex education books, you find that in the museums. But when you post a nude picture, you are afraid that other people may dislike you for posting a nude picture, and you are afraid that the government may prosecute for obscenity, right? So although it's illegal for you to post a nude picture, you decide not to, right? And that's self-censorship. Okay, and self-censorship can happen in various circumstances. One of them is when there is a prior censorship system. Okay, so prior censorship is, we talked about this in the last class. Prior censorship is the system where before you publish something, you have to get it reviewed by a government official, right? That's prior censorship, and that prior censorship can cause self-censorship on people, because if you are allowed to just upload something without getting approved by anyone, you may just do it. But because of that pre-screening requirement, because there is the requirement that you show to government official first, you may decide not to upload anything. You may decide not to publish anything, because that pre-screening requirement makes the government identify you, right? Makes the government aware that you are planning to post this thing, the content of which the government may not like, right? So the prior censorship and self-censorship are not the opposite notions, but prior censorship rather causes self-censorship. And in relation to discussion, in relation to discussion on artificial intelligence, we talked about whether that self-censorship right? Self-censorship is the evil effect that we are trying to prevent, that we are trying to avoid, right? Because we don't want people to be, we don't want people to be afraid of saying lawful things, right? Or publishing lawful material. So to remove the self-censorship effect, to remove the effect of self-censorship, instead of having it reviewed by some government official who may start forming opinions about the publisher, we can have, machine. We can have artificial intelligence review the material to check whether it's a lawful material, right? Instead of the government official. Then there is that effect. Then the effect of informing the government official of your inner motives, right? That effect disappears. So people will feel free to publish things, right? So that's one good side of good possible use of artificial intelligence. But some people may feel that, artificial intelligence, thinks like a human being, talks like a human being, and, it may act like a human being, and I don't want some machine having some opinions about me. So that's still prior censorship, and it will still cause self-censorship effect, right? So that's why we need to talk about whether AI is like a human being, which is the topic for today's discussion. Okay, the second question. This is pretty long. AIs are more efficient, cheaper in the long run, and effective when doing basic labor jobs. When factories introduced machinery, many workers lost their jobs, but overall in society created jobs as well for machine engineers, programmers, and such. So AI actually helped the society and encouraged people to transition from low-paid labor jobs to more complex engineering jobs, which is a good thing. Many governments that continue to subsidize farmers seem like a drain on resources since machines do it better. But on the other hand, machines will never be able to replace some of the jobs. For instance, robots couldn't do what psychologists do. People respond to human interaction over a simple AI interface, which also goes with higher levels of education, professional sports, and etc. So 오른쪽이 that AIs are benefiting society by doing low-paying jobs while opening more complex jobs instead. Well, good point. What do you think? I mean, people are all afraid that AI is going to take away jobs from people, but there will be core things that only human beings can do. So what AI is replacing is, simple activities. Well, I think that there are some responses, some meaningful responses to this question, because as AI is developed, it can reach a level, it replaces high-level activities. Actually, in the field of medicine and in the field of law, where the data is more standardized and better packaged for use by the professionals, AI actually works better in those fields. So this AI, this computer called Watson, developed by IBM, has given diagnosis of people by reading in the symptoms that people report. And Watson's diagnosis has been consistently better than human doctors. So it's not clear that AI is going to take away only the low-level jobs like driving a car, it will take away high-level jobs as well, like lawyering or doctoring, if you will. Anyway, the label issue is one thing that we are, that I didn't talk about in my lecture, but that will be my answer. Okay, next question. Dear Professor, recent AI are not only used to just get data, they involve analysis. What do you think about that, as in getting exposed to those? Okay, I don't know what, Salahuddin, is he here? All right, what do you mean by this question?
I mean, like, who is going to be the responsibilities when AI is any artificial intelligence are making any mistakes?
Sure.
Anything that you know from
Sure. Well, that's today's lecture. So we'll answer that soon. Okay. So who will be responsible for AI making a mistake? There was an accident where the self-driving car in the United States did not recognize the one side of a huge truck, right? And that side was painted white, right? The side of the truck was so big that when the car just looked at the shot, the frontal shot, all the car saw was just, white space. So the car thought that it was just empty space and just ran into it, killing the driver, right? So it was a mistake. Who should be responsible? Well, let's talk about that. Okay? Yes?
What about related to the data stored and analyzed by the AI?
Well, that's another issue, right? That's a data protection issue.
Yes, but the AI could make a mistake and share private personal information.
Sure. Yeah. Breaching. Yeah. Making data breaches. That can be done. I mean, AI can make a lot of mistakes and can cause a lot of harms. AI is sometimes used to, tell civilians from military personnel. So some of the drones use various factors to decide whether the target is a civilian or military person. And sometimes drones make a mistake and kill civilians, right? Of course, humans also make mistakes. And some bad humans intentionally kill civilians, right? So the question is whether is it better to have AI there or have human beings, okay? But if a human being makes a mistake, we know who should be responsible. But when AI makes a mistake, who should be responsible, right? All right, next question. Would not treating machines as inventors give incentives of the creation of intellectual property by encouraging the development of creative computers? Plus, does the current IP law support the finding of infringement that is independent of human involvement? Well, I think that's a very good point. So, if you recognize IP, if you recognize intellectual property of the results of AI software that writes music and writes novels for you, the software developers will be incentivized. They will have more incentives to develop those complicated AI software, right? That's good. That's a good point. But the question is, who should own the intellectual property of the products of AI software? Now the developers will still have incentives to write better AI software or better creative software like novel writing or music writing software because they'll own the intellectual property to the software. Okay? So they can benefit from selling the copies of the creative AI software that writes music, that writes novels, that even paints, right? That can be, of course, that issue is already resolved. But how about the products, right? The products that are created by AI, right? So, I can just okay. So Google's artificial computer just created this freaky painting. Who should own that? Who should own copyright to that picture, right? Is it the software developer? Is it the developer of the software that made this painting, right? This is another painting by artificial intelligence. So it gave the developer gave an inspiration from Edward Munch's masterpiece, Scream, right? And the computer did this. So this economic argument that you made is good, but it does not resolve where IP should go. Right, next, Jennifer. I agree on the point that freeware is one characteristic of ethical status, but can some machines function to have its own freeware, or is that not mechanistically possible? There was an example of regular cars, but recently there are innovators such as Google, Tesla driverless cars, which these cars have free will because they can operate on their own free will without human beings. We're going to talk about this. This is related to the question that Salahuddin proposed. We will talk about this. Okay. I think that free will can only make AI become aware of their existence as a species, not enough for us to see it as a threat. For example, I'm sure a lot of people feel okay being naked in front of animals. Animals have free will, but they don't have the same concept of human sexuality. Same for AI. Well, this is a good point. I agree. AI will be intelligent being, may or may not have free will, but they are just different species. They will be different species, unless we think of them as the same species. So just as we do not, just as we are not afraid of, or we are not ashamed of showing our naked body to the dogs and cats sneaking into your bathroom, maybe we shouldn't have much qualms about having machines inside. That's a good argument. All right. We did talk about this That's why AI may resolve some of the dilemma between, privacy, surveillance, and those things. All right, Dima. In the case of free will cars, if an accident was to happen, someone is killed, should this be blamed on the machines? Okay, this is again Salahuddin. This goes back to Salahuddin's question. Valeria asked the question, today you talked about some software that writes novels and music, so I was wondering if the software developer is the one who should have the copyright and the person who used the software and uses the product pays to the software developer to use it. Or, yes, whoever uses the software will have to pay the developer to get a license to use it, because to use it you'll have to make a copy and put on your own notebook computer or something. To make the copy you'll have to pay a copyright license to the developer. That's fine. But that is a separate question from who should own the IP. Valeria, if you think that they should own the IP, the developer should own the IP, that's fine. But why though, right? When they didn't have any creative involvement in creating these paintings. See? Paintings like this, the humans didn't do it. They just simply put in some text, gave some inspiration to the machine, and the machine did it. These days, the machines just do it themselves, even when the developers don't ask the machines to do it. One morning, just the machine feels like, I feel like painting a picture, and does it, right? Why should the developer own it when the developer was not involved in that creative process at all? Okay. All right. Answered all the questions, and if you noticed, I on your request, I put on, oops, okay. I put on the PPT. Okay, we went through all this. So, just to make connection to what we talked about in the previous class, a lot of ethical rules are based on the premise of equality, that one person should not be above another person. And those things relate to, from that premise comes the rule against prior censorship, the rule on privacy, also copyright rule as well, right? Let's say if you go to a public bath, if you are naked and the other person is naked, nobody really thinks of it as a privacy infringement to see each other, right? So the question is, in that in those settings, should AI be treated like a human being? Now, benefits of looking at AI as a non-human is this. If we rely on robots, we do not have to put one human above another. AI will be at least fair, right? Not subject to corruption or bribery. Okay? And AI will serve important functions like a dice, right? When you cannot decide on an important question, you sometimes just roll a dice. It may not be a substantially reasonable decision, but many people see it as a fair decision. Why do you think that dice is, gives you a fair decision? Because it doesn't involve, right, human interference, right? Then maybe AI can also conduct this function, without being suspected of bribery or corruption. Okay. Now, so again, we are back to the question of is AI like a human being? And one tempting answer is free will. Does AI have free will? Right? Like human beings do. To answer the question, we should think about what free will that human beings have. Right? I mean, do people have free wills? Where does your decision come from? Does it come from your fingers? Come from your heart? Where does your decision to sit in this class and listen to me, where does it come from? Probably it comes from brain, right? But what is brain made of? Brain is made of, protein molecules, right? And the electric signals exchanged among the protein molecules. Now, who governs the movements and the activities, electric activities taking place in the brain? Do you govern it? No. It's the other way around. The brain governs what you think. The brain governs what you feel, what you decide. Then where is your free will, right? In what sense you are free from what the brain orders you or what the brain makes you feel or decide or think? So if you are not, if you are not free in that sense, then maybe, artificial intelligence should be also treated like a human being, because we are not any freer than artificial intelligence. Because just as the AI's thinking will be governed by the code, right, the software code, running the hardware. The same thing with the relationship between us, our feelings, our thoughts, and our brain is not far from, right, what AI thinks or feels in relation to their software and hardware. Okay? Some people believe that, that is too mechanistic a view of human beings, and that we certainly feel that we have a free will, right? But it's very difficult to figure out, from where in this physical world you can find room for free will. But does it mean that we cannot have, if you are already determined, right, by the working of the brain, where do you, how do you attach value to what you do? You think something is important to do, every morning or every day. But if you're thinking of that important thing is already determined by your brain, right? Why is that important? If people attach value to certain things or certain objectives, not because there is some inherent value, not because there is some, value, inherent value in those things, but because the brain is already structured to make you attach those values, then there is really no reason, right? There is no reason to think about. There's no reason to think that that thing that you attach value to has any value, right? It's not because it doesn't have any value, because yes, you think it is valuable, but your thinking is already conditioned by the working of your brain. So some people have, come up with discussion, some responses to this. So, for instance, one of the articles I gave you is a theory of a probability, right? There is no way for a supercomputer or anything to determine, right? Determine in advance what each individual thinks, right? So, it's not true that we are already determined to think or feel a certain way, right? But that doesn't mean that we have free will, because it's only by probability that some of us may feel and think a certain way and others may feel and think other ways in the same situation. So if you put 100 people in one situation, you can predict 30% of people will feel a certain way and 70% people will feel other way. We cannot predict which one of the 100 will belong to the 30% group and which other one will belong to the 70% group. But we can make a pretty good prediction that 30% of people will feel certain way and 70% the other. So, who will have one feeling as opposed to the other will not be up to that person's free will. It is determined by probabilistic distribution. So there again, there's no free will. Now, so the final solution is comparabilism, right? Right. The final solution that people have arrived is that the fact that things are determined by your brain, or the things that the fact that your feelings and thoughts are determined by brain does not really mean that there is no value in this world, or there is no reason for value in this world. Because the fact that it is predetermined doesn't mean that it's not valuable. For instance, you build a machine that can predict who is your greatest painter, right? Caravaggio, right? Or somebody more famous, Da Vinci, right? Let's say a computer analyzes how Da Vinci paints, and somehow learned all the details of Da Vinci's skills, and the computer recreated a Da Vinci's next painting, and Da Vinci actually did created his next painting, and apparently those two paintings are exactly equal. That means the computer, right, in advance predicted how Da Vinci's next painting will be painted. Does it subtract any value from the work of the master? No. That it is predetermined doesn't mean that it's not valuable. Okay? So this gives us a reason to treat AI, right? To treat AI as no different from human beings, because human beings don't have much free will beyond what AI may have. All right, it's about time, so please read, do the reading and read the PPT, and we'll finish the discussion next Tuesday. And we'll do two things in the next Tuesday. We'll wrap up the discussion on artificial intelligence, and we will also talk about pornography. And on Thursday, we'll talk about trademark, okay? Trademark and domain name, internet domain name. I think that will be the last class before the final exam. So it'll be nice to put some time into those two classes. Okay, so there were some deep questions about artificial intelligence today, and we'll talk about them next Tuesday. Okay, thank you.